Good evening, dear insomniac. Come in. Gently, though, if you would. I've got something rather delicate out on the desk, and I don't want to lose my place with it. There. See? Pressed flowers. I found a whole sheaf of them, tucked inside a book of sea charts, of all things. Someone's been using this library's atlases as a flower press, and I can't decide whether to be appalled or charmed. I think charmed. They're very well done. This one still has its colour, look. A little faded at the edges, but holding on. Someone picked it at exactly the right moment, and then had the patience to let it keep. I'll sort out who's been pressing wildflowers into my sea charts another time. For now. There's the fire, there's the tea, and there's a chair with your name on it, or as good as. I have a story for you tonight. I found it written out in a small book. One of those plain cloth-bound ones, with no title on the spine, the kind a person buys to put something of their own into. This one had been shelved among the herbals, which turned out to be exactly the right place for it. It's about a young woman who kept a potion shop in a city, alone, on a street you'd only find if you already knew where it was. Most of it is simply her day. And then, partway through, somebody comes in and asks her for something she hasn't got. It's called The Little Shop on Briar Hill. Settle in. Let the fire do its work. In the old quarter of a city too large to know all of itself, on a narrow cobbled street called Briar Hill that wound upward between leaning stone buildings and came to a dead end at a low wall overlooking the river, there was a small shop with a green door and a hand-lettered sign in the window that read, in careful, unhurried script, Remedies. The shop belonged to a young woman named Clover. She was younger than people expected when they finally found the place, which took most of them a while, because Briar Hill was not on the way to anything. To reach it, you had to leave the broad avenues behind and make your way through the old quarter, past the clockmaker, who was always asleep in his doorway, past the courtyard with the cracked fountain, where the neighbourhood cats held court, up the crooked stairs between two buildings that leaned so close at the top they looked like they were sharing a secret, and then along the last narrow stretch, where the cobbles went uneven and the noise of the city fell away behind you like something you'd set down. Clover had dark hair she kept tied back in a knot that started the day tidy and finished it considerably less so, and hands that were always stained, green at the fingertips from the crushing, brown under the nails from the digging, and sometimes, in the right light, faintly gold from the pollen of whatever she'd been working with that morning. She kept the shop alone, and had done for 2 years, since the woman who'd taught her the trade had grown tired and stiff and gone to live with her sister out past the orchards. Marin had left her nearly everything: the bench, the knives, the deep wooden chair by the window, the brass bell above the door, a notebook full of small slanted handwriting and almost no measurements, because Marin had kept all her measurements in her hands. She'd left the habit of gathering too. Every ingredient in the shop Clover cut herself. Once or twice a week, she took the canvas sack out into the low green hills beyond the city and came home hours later with her boots dark and her sleeves rolled, and the whole street knew when she'd been out, because the smell came up Briar Hill ahead of her, the deep wet green of cut stems and crushed petals, which the neighbours said smelled like rain, and which actually smelled like the place rain had just been. But this particular day was not a gathering day. This was a shop day, and shop days had their own shape. It began in the dark, not properly dark. The grey-blue, almost light that comes before dawn has quite made up its mind. Clover slept in the back room, behind a curtain, in a narrow bed with a familiar dip in the mattress, And she woke without a bell, the way people do when their body has learned the hour and taken responsibility for it. She lay still a moment. The city was quiet at that hour, quieter than it ever got again. Just the river, if the air was still, and a dog somewhere down the hill barking twice, and then reconsidering. Then she pushed back the blanket, set her feet on the cold floor, and started. The stove came first. It was a squat iron thing, older than she was, and it had opinions in the mornings that had to be respected. Kindling first, never logs, and the damper opened gently rather than yanked, or it would smoke and sulk for an hour. Clover had learned its moods the way you learn anyone's, by paying attention and not taking it personally. She crouched in the half-dark, feeding it small sticks until the first real flame caught, set the kettle over it, and left it to think about warming up. Then the racks. The drying racks hung from the ceiling on cords, long wooden frames, 6 of them, loaded with everything she'd brought in over the past fortnight. Checking them was the first proper task of every morning, and she'd never once found it dull. She moved along beneath them with her fingers up, touching. A leaf here, a stem there, feeling for the exact papery give that meant ready, and the faint remaining softness that meant not yet. Give it another day. The rosemary wanted another day. The chamomile from earlier in the week was ready. The flower heads gone, the colour of old paper, and rattling faintly when the bundle shifted. She took it down and set it on the bench. And on the end of the last rack, where they'd been hanging since the previous summer and had been waiting patiently ever since for her to get round to them, 4 bundles of lavender. She'd cut them at the height of the season and hung them, and then simply never found the morning for the stripping, which is the sort of thing that happens in a shop run by one person. Today was the morning. She took all 4 down. Then the jars, on the 3 long shelves behind the bench, glass and clay and dark ceramic, each one labelled in her own small hand, which was careful and tilted slightly to the left. She ran her eyes along them, the way a shopkeeper counts stock. Not bottle by bottle, but by the overall shape of the shelf, noticing the gaps, the ones running low, the ones so full they could wait. Her hands knew them as well as her eyes. She could find the valerian in the dark. She could tell the 2 silver bells apart, the hill kind and the marsh kind, which looked identical and behaved nothing alike, by the feel of the lids alone, because the hill jar had a chip on the rim she'd never got around to replacing, and privately never intended to. The kettle came to the boil while she was still at the shelves, and she made the first cup of the day and drank it standing at the bench. Plain black tea, nothing in it, hot and strong and completely unromantic. It was not the tea she made for anybody else. It was the tea you drink with your eyes already on the work. Then the stripping. Clover sat down, rolled her sleeves past her elbows, and pulled the lavender toward her. This was slow, repetitive, deeply pleasant work, running a thumb and finger down each stalk, so the dried buds came away in a rush and fell into the ceramic bowl below. The smell rose up as she went, more and more of it, until the whole front of the shop had gone thick with it, and she could feel it on the back of her throat. 4 bundles took the better part of an hour. She didn't hurry it. Hurrying stripped the stalk raw, and got green matter in the bowl, and green matter in the bowl meant the whole lot would go musty in the jar within a month. She was still at it when the bell rang. The bell was a small brass thing on a curved bracket, Murren's, and the sound it made was more of a suggestion than an announcement, a single modest ting that said someone had come in without making any fuss about it. Clover looked up. She always looked up the same way. Not startled, not interrupted. Simply moving her attention from one thing to another with the calm of a person who has room for both. It was Mrs. Allard from 2 streets over. Compact, brisk, grey hair pinned up tight. An expression suggesting the world was running about 10 minutes behind her personal schedule. She came in the way she always came in, which was quickly and already talking. "Clover, the salve. My hands again." Clover was already reaching for the shelf. She knew the hands. Knuckles that swelled stiff and sore whenever the weather turned damp. Comfrey and beeswax and a little calendula oil, melted down and set in a clay pot with a cork lid. "Let it come to room warmth before you use it," she said. "Goes on better." Mrs. Allard turned the pot over, inspecting it with the frank, appraising look of a woman who'd been buying remedies for 40 years and could spot a bad batch at 10 paces. "Same comfrey as last time? Same hillside, same patch." She gave Clover the look she reserved for people she considered to be doing things the hard way on purpose. "I still don't know why you don't buy from the market like everyone else. You'd save half your week." "I would," Clover agreed. Mrs. Allard waited for the rest of the sentence. It didn't arrive. She set a few coins on the bench, tucked the salve into her coat pocket, and made for the door. "You're an odd young woman." "So I'm told." "The salve is good, though." The bell gave its ting, and the shop settled, and Clover went back to the lavender. The morning went on in that fashion. She finished the stripping and jarred it and wrote the label. She rubbed the chamomile heads off their stems, and jarred that too. She melted down a fresh batch of the comfrey salve, because Mrs. Allard had taken the last of it, and the damp weather meant 3 more people would want it before the week was out. The beeswax going liquid and clear in the small pan, the calendula oil stirred through, the whole lot poured off into pots and set on the cold end of the bench. It would need the night to go properly hard. She'd cork them and label them in the morning. She swept. She refilled the water basin. She took the compost bucket out the back, because nothing was wasted. Even the scraps went into the soil eventually, and came up again as something else. Around midday, a man she didn't know came in with a burn on his forearm, got from a kitchen he described in some detail, and with some feeling. Clover looked at it properly, decided it wasn't as bad as he thought, and told him so, which visibly improved his morning, and sent him off with a jar of the honey and plantain dressing and instructions to keep it covered and stop poking at it. She had bread and cheese standing up at the bench. Then, in the early afternoon, the bell rang again. And this time, it was different, because whoever had come in didn't say anything. Clover looked up. It was a woman of about 60, in a good coat that had been rained on and not properly dried, standing just inside the door with a folded piece of paper held in both hands. She had the look of someone who had walked a long way and arrived at the last place on a list. "Are you the herbalist?" she said. "They told me down at the bridge there was one up here. I've been to 4. "There's only me," said Clover. "Come in. Sit down. There's only the one chair, but it's a good one." The woman didn't sit. She came to the bench and unfolded the paper and put it down flat, smoothing it with her palm, and Clover saw that it was a physician's note, written in the cramped, confident hand physicians use. "It's for my husband," the woman said. "His chest. It's been bad since the winter, and it hasn't come right. The doctor's given us what he can, and it's kept him breathing, and I'm grateful for it, but it isn't mending. And he said, She tapped the paper. He said there's an old preparation that would help, said his own teacher used to make it, but he doesn't have the plant, and he doesn't know anyone who does. Clover turned the paper around and read it. She read it twice. Then she said, Riverlight. That's the word, is it? Do you know it? I know it. Clover set the paper down. I haven't got any. She watched the woman's face do the thing faces do at the 5th no in a row, and added quickly, That isn't the end of the sentence. I said I haven't got any. I know where it grows. The woman's hands came off the bench. It's called Riverlight because of what it does at night, Clover said. It holds warmth and gives it back after dark, and the undersides of the leaves go. Not bright exactly, faintly pale, like something remembering being lit. It only grows in one sort of place, deep shade, running water, and a spring that comes up warm out of the ground. It wants all three at once, and there's almost nowhere on earth that's all three. But you know somewhere. I know one place. It's a good 5 hours out, and the last of it is off any path worth the name. My teacher took me there twice when I was learning, and I've been back once alone. Clover thought for a moment. It's not a hard walk. It's just a long one. And you'd go? I'd go tomorrow. I'd want the whole day for it. She looked up. What's his name? The woman blinked. Tobin. Then I'll want 2 days after that to prepare it properly. It can't be rushed, and rushing it would waste the walk. Say 4 days to be safe. Can Tobin manage 4 days? He's managed since winter. The woman's voice did something complicated. 4 days is nothing. 4 days is... She stopped and pressed her fingers against the bench and got hold of herself. What do I owe you? We'll settle it when I know what it took. Come back in 4 days. If I've got it, I'll have it ready. If I haven't got it, I'll tell you honestly and you'll owe me nothing. The woman left. Clover stood at the bench a while, looking at the physician's note, and then folded it and put it under the chipped-lid silver bell jar where she'd be certain to see it, and got on with the rest of her afternoon, because the shop still needed closing down properly, and no amount of thinking about tomorrow would do it. She swept the bench clean, washed the knives and dried them, and rolled them back into their leather, wiped the wood down in long, even strokes, until it was bare and smelled faintly of the day, a ghost of lavender, a breath of chamomile, the warm wax note of the salve. She banked the stove for the night, not roaring, just ticking, a low companionable warmth that would hold the shop at the right temperature for the racks until morning. Then she made the other tea, her own, from a small jar on the high shelf, mixed the way she liked it, and changed a little with the seasons, and took it to the deep wooden chair by the window, and sat and watched the street go gold. Briar Hill did that every evening. The last of the sun found the upper stories first, and lit them one by one, while the street below fell into shadow, so that for a few minutes the whole hill looked like it was being slowly dipped in honey from the top down. The clockmaker was still asleep. The cats had shifted from the fountain to a final patch of light on the cobbles, arranged in the boneless, untroubled way cats arrange themselves once they've decided the day has given them everything it's going to. Clover watched. She did this every evening. Nothing ever happened on Briar Hill at that hour, and that was rather the point. It let the day settle into itself the way herbs settle into a jar, slowly, without being pushed. She thought about the hollow, and how she'd get there, and what she'd need to carry. She thought about Marin, who had walked her out there twice and made her memorize the way rather than draw it. Because a map's no use to you in the dark, And neither are you if you've never had to find it yourself. Then she rinsed her cup, turned the lamp in the window down low. Not out, never out. And went to bed early. She left before dawn. The city was still asleep in the way cities are at that hour, which is to say, not asleep at all, but not yet performing. She went down Briar Hill with the sack over her shoulder and bread and cheese wrapped in cloth and a full water skin, and her boots ringing on the cobbles. And by the time she reached the market district, the bakers were the only ones awake, and the smell of it followed her 4 streets. Past the market, the buildings got lower. The cobbles gave way to packed earth, and then to a dirt track between low stone walls, and then to open ground, the scrubby rolling land between the city's edge and the hills. The light came up properly somewhere in there, a thin grey that warmed slowly, and Clover felt the change the way you feel a room get larger when someone opens a window. The first 3 hours were easy walking and familiar country. She passed the south-facing slope above the second stream, where the wild thyme grew thick in the gravelly soil. She passed the stand of elder at the bottom of the long meadow, not in flower yet, but she noted where it was up to, because a person who gathers keeps a running account of everything they walk past, whether they mean to or not. She passed the boggy ground, near the old stone wall, where the meadowsweet came up waist-high, and the valerian hid among it, looking like nothing much, being very much indeed. Then she left the ground she knew. The turn came at a fallen beech that had come down across a gully some years back, and rotted into a long green ridge. Maren had made her learn it as a landmark. Not the path, the tree. Paths shift. Trees stay put until they don't. And when they don't, you'll know. Clover climbed over it and went down into the gully and up the other side. And after that, there was no path at all, only the sense of the land tilting a particular way and the sound of water getting nearer. The country changed as she went in. It got closer and greener and older. The trees grew thicker and leaned together overhead until the light came down through them, the colour of a bottle. The ground went soft with 100 years of leaf fall, so that her boots made almost no sound, and the birds carried on above her without much interest. It was cool in there, and damp, and the air had that particular still, held quality that deep woodland gets, as though the whole place had been holding one long breath since before anyone thought to come looking. She walked another 2 hours in that green light, and it was slower going than the open country, and she lost her way twice. Both times she corrected the same way, working back downhill until she found running water, and then following it up again, because the whole business of getting there was really only the business of finding the right water and staying with it. Each correction cost her the better part of an hour. She stopped once to eat, sitting on a rock with her boots in the leaf litter, listening to a wood that had no interest in her at all. And then, sometime in the middle of the afternoon, she came over a low rise between 2 enormous mossed-over stones. And there it was. The hollow. It was a small place, smaller than she remembered, which is how it goes with places from your apprenticeship. A steep-sided bowl of ground perhaps 30 paces across, the walls of it hung with fern and liverwort and moss, so thick it had gone velvet, and at the bottom a spring. The spring came up out of the rock at the far end and ran the length of the hollow in a shallow braided stream over pale stones, and it was warm. You could see it before you felt it, a thin drifting steam that lifted off the surface in the cool air and hung there in the green half-light, moving slowly, going nowhere. The whole hollow was warm because of it. Coming down into that bowl was like stepping into a room where someone had left the fire going, and along both banks of that warm stream, in the deep shade, growing nowhere else in the hollow, and nowhere else Clover had ever seen. Riverlight. It was not a spectacular plant to look at. That was the thing about it. A low creeping thing with round leaves the size of a thumbnail, growing in dense mats right at the water's edge, where the warmth and the wet met, dark green on the top, and, when you turned one over, a pale silvery underside like the inside of a shell. Clover put the sack down and sat on her heels at the edge of the water and looked at it for a while before she touched anything. Then she got to work. She took the small knife, the very sharp one, for delicate things, and she went along the bank slowly, and she was careful, because Marin had been extremely clear about this and had said it more than once, which for Marin was practically a lecture. Never take more than a third from any one mat. Never take from the ends of a run, only the middle where it can close over. And never, ever take the ones with the runners out, because those are the ones doing the spreading, and if you take those you've eaten next year. So Clover moved along the warm stream in the green underwater light, crouching and shifting and crouching again, taking a little here and a little there, leaving the runners, leaving the edges, working the middle of each mat, and then moving on. It took a long time. The steam drifted past her hands. The water went over the pale stones, with a sound so continuous it stopped being a sound. Somewhere above the hollow, a bird said something twice and got no reply. She filled the sack about a third full, which was as much as she was willing to take and rather more than she needed, and then she stopped and washed her hands in the warm water and sat back on the bank and ate the last of the bread. And then, because she was 5 hours from anywhere and had already done the hard part, she stayed a little while. She sat on the mossed bank with her boots off and her feet in the warm shallow stream, and looked at the ferns on the walls and the steam going up through the green light. And she thought about the fact that Marin had brought her here twice and made her memorize the way, and had never once said this will matter some day. She'd simply taken her out and shown her and made her walk it again a year later without help, and left it at that. The way you'd leave a key with someone without explaining which door. The walk back took longer, because the sack was full, and she was tired, and she knew the way now, and so didn't have to think about it, which is its own kind of slow. She came up out of the trees, onto the open ground, with the light already going, and down through the scrubland in the long gold, and reached the city well after dark. She went up Briar Hill by lamplight, with her boots caked and her shoulders aching, and the few people still out got a smell off her they'd never had before. Not the deep wet green of a normal gathering day, but something stranger and cleaner underneath it, mineral and faintly warm, like stone after rain. She lit the lamp in the window. She hung the riverlight to dry, spread flat on a cloth on the lowest rack, not bundled, because bundling would have bruised it. She ate something she didn't taste. And then she slept for 9 hours, which she almost never did. The preparation took the 2 days she'd allowed for it, and didn't go a bit faster for her wanting it to. She began by taking the physician's note out from under the chipped silver bell jar and propping it against the wall at the back of the bench, where she could see it while she worked, because the dose mattered, and she had no intention of trusting her memory of a stranger's handwriting. The leaves had to be dried slow and low, nowhere near the stove, or the whole point of them cooked off. Then bruised, not ground. She used the flat of the heavy knife, working across the bench in a long, patient rhythm, press, lift, shift, press, and then steeped in warm oil for a full day and a night in a covered clay pot well away from the stove, and strained twice through cloth, and set into small dark bottles that she labelled in her small slanted hand and stoppered tight. 4 days after the woman had first come in, the bell rang, and it was her. Clover put the bottles on the bench. The woman looked at them. She reached out and touched one and didn't pick it up. "You went," she said. "I went." "How far was it?" "Far enough to be worth doing," said Clover, "and not so far I wouldn't do it again. There's 4 bottles there. That's more than the note calls for, but it keeps well, and it does no harm to have spare. Twice a day, warmed slightly, and he'll want to sit up for an hour after. It won't be quick. Give it 3 weeks before you decide anything about it." The woman nodded. Then she nodded again, several times, and stopped touching the bottle and pressed the heel of her hand against her eye for a moment, and Clover looked politely at the shelf behind her until that was over. They settled up. It was less than the woman offered, and more than Clover would have asked from someone she knew, and they both let it go at that. At the door the woman stopped. 4 places told me no, she said. The last one told me the plant didn't exist. He said it was an old wives' thing, and I should stop chasing it. "It exists," said Clover. "How does anyone know a thing like that, where it grows, a place like that?" Clover thought about the green half-light, and the steam going up off the warm water, and a much younger version of herself being marched out there for the second time, and told to find the fallen beech on her own. "Somebody took me," she said, "and made me remember it." The woman went out. The bell gave its modest ting, and Clover turned back to the bench where the ordinary work was waiting, having waited 4 days already without complaint. She started with the salve, which had gone hard and pale on the cold end of the bench, and had been sitting there uncorked since before she left. She wiped each pot, corked them one at a time, wrote the labels, and set them on the shelf in a row, 11 of them, and made a note of it in the book she kept for that purpose, because Marin had been immovable on the subject of knowing what you had. Then the rosemary, which had been ready since the morning before she went and had been hanging there ever since. She took the bundles down and sat and stripped them, thumb and finger down each stalk, the needles coming away in a rush into the bowl beneath, the sharp resinous smell of it lifting into the room and cutting straight through the last of the riverlight's cool mineral edge that had been hanging about the shop for days. That took an hour and a half, and she was glad of it. There is a particular usefulness in a task that requires your hands and nothing else at all, after several days of requiring rather more. The bell went twice while she worked, a man wanting something for a child's cough, which she had made up and jarred and could hand over in a minute. And then, later, the boy from the house with the blue shutters near the bridge, sent for his grandmother's sleeping tea, and taking a very long time to leave, on account of having noticed the drying racks and wanting to know what everything on them was. Clover told him. All of it, 1 rack at a time, which took considerably longer than the transaction warranted, and which she did not begrudge in the slightest. He crushed a rosemary needle between his fingers and held it to his nose and looked up at the ceiling, like a person who has just discovered the world is larger than he'd been informed. He asked if he could come back sometime, just to look. "Any time," she said. "Doors open." After that she jarred the rosemary and labelled it and put it up. She went along the shelves and ran her eyes over the whole row, noting the gaps. The thyme was down to 1/3, the plantain nearly gone, the comfrey fine for a month, and turned that over in her head against the weather and the season, and settled on where she'd go when she next took the sack out. Not the hollow, somewhere close and easy. She'd earned an easy one. She refilled the water basin. She took the compost bucket out the back because nothing was wasted. Even the scraps went into the soil eventually and came up again as something else. And by then, the light through the front window had gone long and thick and amber and had crossed the floorboards and started climbing the far wall. And the day had quietly finished itself while she wasn't watching. So she swept the bench clean, washed the knives and dried them and rolled them into their leather, wiped the wood down in long even strokes until it was bare and smelled faintly of everything that had happened on it. She banked the stove for the night, not roaring, just ticking, a low companionable warmth to hold the rack steady until morning. Then she made her own tea from the small jar on the high shelf and took it to the deep wooden chair by the window and sat. Briar Hill was going gold. The last of the sun found the upper stories first and lit them one by one, while the street below fell into shadow, so that for a few minutes the whole hill looked like it was being slowly dipped in honey from the top down. The clockmaker was still asleep. The cats had shifted from the fountain to a final patch of light on the cobbles, arranged in the boneless, untroubled way cats arrange themselves once they've decided the day has given them everything it's going to. Clover watched the way she did every evening. Nothing ever happened on Briar Hill at that hour, and that was rather the point of it. It let the days settle the way herbs settle into a jar, slowly, without being pushed. Her legs still ached from the walk. She expected they would for another day or so. When the blue came in, she rinsed the cup and set it upside down on the cloth by the basin, and turned the lamp in the window down low. Not out, never out. Just a small, steady amber glow, not bright enough to read by, not trying to be. Only enough to be seen from the bottom of the hill, if a person happened to look up, and to know that the shop was there, and that the green door would open in the morning, and that whatever they'd come all that way to ask for, someone inside would at least know where to start looking. There. That's the one from the little cloth-bound book. I like that she stayed a while at the end of it, sat down with her feet in the warm water when she'd already got what she came for and had every reason to start back. I think that's my favourite part, and I don't think she'd have called it the important part at all. Close your eyes now, dear insomniac. You've come a long way today, whichever way it went. There's nothing else to carry and nowhere else to be, and the work, whatever yours is, will still be there in the morning, being perfectly patient about it. Let the warmth get into you. Let everything else go quiet. Sleep well.